Yeah, welcome to the Racer X Exhaust Podcast, brought to you by Yoshimura. Spoiler alert, in this week's episode, the best interview I have yet done on one of these podcasts. Jason Wygant here. Look, this guest, Ian Harrison, has stories for days, stories for years, but most people don't hear them because for the last 23 years, Ian has been the wingman or the right-hand man of Roger DeCoster, first at Suzuki and now at KTM. There is a considerable shadow when you're working alongside Roger DeCoster, who is, no doubt about it, the most accomplished person in the history of this sport, both as a racer and then what he's done with team management and race teams and also Motocross of Nations teams since his days as a racer ended. But for a large majority of this time, like I said, since the 1995 season, it's 23 years ago, Ian Harrison has been there at Roger's side. And now he has gotten a promotion. Because 2 weeks ago, KTM announced that DeCoster is moving up. He is now the motorsport director for both KTM and Husqvarna North America. And Ian Harrison is going to become the Red Bull KTM team manager. So Roger has moved into a more senior role, overseeing all of KTM and Husky racing in the United States. But the day-to-day team manager work will now be Ian Harrison's role. Now, Ian is from South Africa. He came along with Greg Albertyn on Suzuki. DeCoster was managing the Suzuki team in 95. That's how he and DeCoster hooked up. And the story for him then to where he has gotten now to run the KTM team starting in 2019 is absolutely fascinating. Not only has this guy been in the trenches, in the stuff, but in addition, Ian has always been known as one of the friendliest, one of the nicest, one of the funniest guys at the races. I'm actually honestly shocked that this interview hasn't been done before, but I have a feeling the world's going to learn a lot more about Ian Harrison when he becomes the front man for the team, starting really as soon as Motocross of Nations and Monster Cup coming up. So really, you're going to enjoy this interview with Ian. Just got to give a shout out to Yoshimura, who of course is the presenting sponsor of this podcast. Check them out for everything you need for your four-stroke exhaust. Yoshimura-RD.com. Every week I tell you about the cool titanium header pipe for the Works Edition Honda. They've got great stuff for regular Hondas. Yes, KTMs, if you like the bikes that Ian Harrison works on. Lots of great stuff. Suzuki's, of course, too, because they're a big part of that JGR team, which I can almost hear the Yoshimura pipes as they're testing with Chad Reed, Justin Hill, a couple other guys are right up the road from my house. So check out Yoshimura for all your exhaust needs, any brand, ATVs, bikes, street bikes. Racer X brand, we've got clothing, we've got hats, we've got backpacks, and we've got 20% off for you. So just type in exhaust in all capital letters. Make sure you do not type in anything related to the word pulp, because I want to get credit for the 20% off discount, not Mathis. So that's it, Racer X brand and Yoshimura. Thanks to the help there. And now let's get to... Oh, wait, no, I've got to do something. Podcast. 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 Yeah, that was a good one. And I'm recording those new every week because I like to annoy my wife who's downstairs having to listen to this crap every time I do it. Oh, no, as a matter of fact, I'm looking out the window right now. She's driving away. She's driving away from the house. No coincidence, as soon as I started singing the podcast theme song. Let's move on to some much better audio. This is Ian Harrison, now the team manager of Red Bull KTM. Hey, you got a job promotion here in a way, but I don't know if fans necessarily know that. I feel like you have been Roger's right-hand man, and you've been doing a lot for a long time. I don't know how many people outside the pits realize that, but is this a significant change now that you've been announced as team manager, or you were already kind of doing a lot of this stuff in the first place? How different is this going to be?
It's going to be a little bit different.
Okay.
I've always had I've always held Roger in the position of being the boss of the team, obviously, and yes, we do pretty much communicate about everything, but ultimately, he was always the deciding factor, and still will be in many ways, because now he's the director, so he's basically across KTM and Husqvarna. So For myself, I'm looking forward to it. You know, I think there are some new challenges. Roger's been awesome the last few years with letting me do some of the work on the contracts, doing the budget. All those things I think have been a little bit of a prep to get ready for this point, you know, in my career.
So is Roger still going to go to all the races, or is this a change from that perspective?
You know, I think Roger will go to all the races as long as he can. He truly loves it. I don't know how he does it, because sometimes the travel can get to me a little bit, but to him, that's the best part, is being at the races, and so I would never picture him not going.
I'm surprised to hear you say the travel can get to you, but because I don't feel like I've ever seen you at a race not super happy and pumped up. You seem like you love this. Maybe not quite as much as him, but you must be darn close.
No, yeah, I do love it, but the travel can get a little bit hectic. It seems like they do all the maintenance on the airplanes when you step onto them these days, you know?
Yeah, that's right. Maybe they need to get to the office before 8 a.m. to do technical stuff like you guys do.
Yeah, maybe that'll help.
Yeah. Okay, you can answer this one. You always seem like you're happy and pumped to be at the races. You always give the vibe to me of a guy that's like, I cannot believe this. I'm really doing this. I'm really here. Is that the way you feel? Because, I mean, you came a long way. You're in the United States and South Africa. You're working for a premier team, and you get the chance to win races and titles. It almost seems to me like I'm watching a guy walking around saying, my dream has come true. Is that the way you feel when you're at the races? Because you sure seem to enjoy it.
That is exactly the way I feel. I mean, I was a little kid, and I had Johnny O'Mara and all those guys on my closet door, you know, pinned up there. And I just used to think, how am I ever going to get there? You know, how's this ever going to happen? And I went through school racing, and when I finished school, my dad, of course, said, okay, if you want to race, you pay for it. So that was the last race I ever went to, because there was no way I was going to be able to pay for it. And then I went to a trade school, so basically I started a trade as a diesel mechanic during school. That's pretty common in South Africa. Mm-hmm. And I finished school, and I carried on with that trade. And still, my focus then was Greg, and he was like my hero, because he had gone to Europe and he was doing well. And then his dad reached out to me about going to Europe with him, and of course, I said, yeah, no problem, but I didn't know what I was getting myself into, you know, and but ultimately, actually, it led to my dream of being able to come to America, being involved in the racing from just being a mechanic to all the way through the different steps in my career. And to this point, and I feel like I'm living the dream. My story that I had in my head when I was a little kid came true.
Yeah, Albee is really the third part of this. You and Roger have been together through a lot of this, but Albee is what led to that. So it really was, if Albee doesn't come to America with Suzuki in 95, which then means he works at Roger, does all of this happen? Or did that move to Suzuki at the right place at the right time? It almost seems like that needed to be, it was perfect the way it worked out, and that's the way it needed to work out.
You're exactly right. That's exactly how it needed to work out. Without Greg and without missing the opportunity the year before to go ride for Honda, mm-hmm. that thing fell apart at the end of 1993, mm-hmm. and then him staying with Suzuki, but Suzuki saying that they would send him to the States the following year. That all was part of the big plan, I suppose you could put it that way, and yeah. Then we ended up here.
Okay, so let's go back to those early days in South Africa. So was Albee already a hero in South Africa before he went to Europe, or did he leave so early that you didn't necessarily know what you guys had on your hands? No, you could tell. I mean, he was even in '80s, he was just a phenomenal rider, you know, and he left to go to Europe in, I think the very first year was '89, so he was all of 16 years old, and he went and raced a couple Supercrosses. I remember Maastricht was one of them, and I think he finished fourth, actually, and that was with Johnson, Bale, a couple other guys that were in there, and so then, of course, we knew there was something special, you know, and then he came back, and then he got a private deal sponsor to go back and race in Europe, and
he really, his dad funded most of it in the beginning because he just had this small deal that I think his base salary at that time was 10,000 gulden from the team, which is the equivalent to $5,000, and he was actually world champion that year.
What?
So
wow.
So then, and the guy he rode for had been in racing for many, many years, a guy similar to Roger, Jan de Groot, and he had his team, and Greg was his first world champion. So that like really launched the thing, and that was when that was my first full year in Europe with him. So it was just like the whole thing came together. But it was truly, Greg had been there already in 1990 and 91, and he was plagued with some injuries like most riders are, and then 92 things just came together, and then he won 3 world titles in a row.
What was your background with him before Europe? Did you guys know each other before that 92 season?
So when we were kids, and he was riding 85 cc or 80 cc at the end, which it was at that time, and I was 2 years older than Greg. I was riding the hundreds, and we met, and in South Africa we were not allowed to use because of fuel embargoes. We were not allowed to use fuel in racing. You had to use methanol, which is a kind of an alcohol, and so you had to drill your main jets in the bikes and stuff to get them to run. Wow. And there were no cordless drills at that time, so you need a little generator, and you needed and Greg's dad had all this stuff, and my dad was not mechanically inclined, so Greg's dad would see these 2 little kids, myself and my brother, drilling, and he'd like, no, you guys are going crooked. You need to do this. So, and he kind of took us on. So I knew Greg, and we were friends. But his dad actually is where it all started from, and then he would help us, and that's how the friendship grew. But I've known Greg for most of my life now. Yeah. So and he's still a good friend to this day.
Those years in Europe, I mean, you guys were on fire. It's hard to say how many titles and race wins you guys left on the table by taking the plunge to come to the United States. I've read some interviews, even where Albee at the time, where he's like, I had Everts totally and completely covered, mentally defeated. I mean, Everts is a stud, no doubt. But you guys really had it figured out, it seemed like, those couple years over there.
Yeah, absolutely. Greg was very motivated to do something the first time. He struggled with repeating it. Like he's always said to me, I don't know how Carmichael can remotivate himself to win the same thing that he's already won time and time again. So, but to get to the challenge to win the 125cc World Championship was an ultimate goal. And once he won his first Grand Prix, which was actually that first one we went to in 1992 in Spain in Jerez. It was like once he knew he could do it, it was pretty much tickets for the rest of the guys. Then he was on fire, And then the following year, we were riding Hondas in '93, and the bike was very, very good. Jeremy, of course, and a lot of the Honda team were winning here in the States, and he ended up, I think, winning 10 of the 15 Grand Prix, if I remember, and he absolutely dominated Stefan, and he beat Stefan more on the mental side. He was very strong mentally. He didn't have the same talent as what Stefan had. That's for sure not. But on the mental side, he could get him, and it's such a big factor to have both of those, And then the next year was a struggle in 94 because he had switched. He went to Stefan's team pretty much, which was Suzuki, and Stefan went to his old team, which had switched to Kawasaki. So we battled with Stefan, and that was a tough year. But in the end, he came out victorious. So and then we made the move to the States, and then we really started an uphill battle. But he dug his heels in, and he only won one Supercross ever. But there's guys that have been incredible riders like Travis Pastrana, and who have never ever won a Supercross race. So it just goes to show how tough it is to actually win just one Supercross race.
Oh yeah, there's quite a list of riders that were never able to do it. My buddy Langston, your countryman. I mean, no doubt he could have won Supercross races, but it didn't even work out for him. So you just never know.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Hey, that '94 year. So I didn't realize this. So at one point you were thinking you would be racing in the United States that season, and then you ended up not. Was that actually tough to get motivated for then?
Yeah, and I don't want to misquote you because you know I was Greg's mechanic at the time, but from what I remember is he in Japan or a little bit earlier he had talked to Dave Arnold, who was running the Honda team, and he said, "Listen, I want to come to the States." Dave was excited to do it. I mean, and they talked about something, and they actually more or less came up with a number.
Yeah.
Nothing in writing.
Yep.
But they wanted to do it. But then Japan said, listen, why do we want to move this guy to America and pay for him when he's winning titles for us for a private team that's costing us nearly nothing? Just leave him where he's at. Mm-hmm. But this all happened so late, and Greg had actually told Jan, his team boss, that, listen, I'm out of here. I'm going to America. So Jan went around, and he actually hired Stefan. So Greg... Finally, when everything kind of fell through, he went back to Jan and he said, "Hey, you know what? This didn't work out. I'm going to need a ride next year." And he went, "Oh, I'm sorry. I have Stefan."
Oh.
So he was like high and dry. He was the world champion, and it was late in the season. People were signed, and he had been blabbing his mouth that we're going to go to America, and he was without a ride. But luckily, the Suzuki thing all came up. But then he didn't have much bargaining power, you know. So then he had to take, you know, where the gear, everything was lumped together, and he really didn't have much of an option, and that's how it went. And they took really, really good care of him, and it was a fantastic team run by Sylvain Geboers. It was, at that time in Europe, they were by far the best team that was in the paddock. It was a first-class operation.
I remember seeing that and seeing the success that Suzuki was having with Geboers there in Europe. And as you probably know, it was definitely not the case in the United States. Suzuki was struggling big time. Then they bring Roger in, and this all pretty much happened at the same time, right? Like did Roger start at Suzuki the same year you two came over? It's all happening in a very short amount of time. Yes,
actually, I think Sylvain Geboers, he orchestrated the whole thing with Roger.
Okay.
And once he got Greg, and Greg had told him, listen, next year I want to move, he already started working with Japan. Roger was already in Europe working with Honda, with that Pepsi Honda team, who were Talon Boland and Yves de Maria.
Mm-hmm.
And so they had talked many times at the races, and I think that just ended up working the whole thing in, and Roger starting. So when Greg and I flew here in November of 1994, with our gear bags and a toolbox, Roger picked us up in his big van, and that was it. So we were like the three. There we go, you know. So we were the three newbies coming into Suzuki, and that's where we started. And when I came from Suzuki Europe to Suzuki America, I just couldn't believe the difference in how the whole structure worked. It was like chalk and cheese, you know, and you could see there was a long road to getting them on track, you know.
Oh, so when you guys go to the opener at Orlando, everybody already knew, as you said, it was an uphill battle. Greg is going to have to learn Supercross in the Premier class on the fly. But then you only got started in November, so
we got started in November, and I remember that December it rained like crazy, and we couldn't practice at a lot of places, and we were going all over. And it was just like one obstacle after another to slow us down, you know. So it was definitely tough.
Yeah, so that Orlando Supercross, that didn't work out very well at all. I know he hurt his shoulder, but I do remember hearing this. I remember reading this.
They never worked out.
No. That was always several years it didn't work out.
Yeah.
But this is funny. I remember reading in Cycle News about him going to the hospital in the ambulance when he messes up his shoulder. And they said that Greg and you were hilarious and awesome to hang out with, even in an ambulance. People were like so shocked. Like, we've never met these guys, but they're really friendly and they're really cool. So that's what I remember hearing from that. Like, at least these guys are cool from what I can tell.
Yeah, no, I know. You know, we were just like living the dream. So of course we were just happy. You know, I mean, he was bummed out. And you know, the funny thing is, I remember we had to go wait on the sidewalk for the ambulance because the ambulance had already taken somebody else to the hospital. There was no ambulance. So he was standing with his head over his arm over his head.
Yeah.
You know, because his shoulder was dislocated, and we're just standing there waiting for the ambulance to come back. And I'm like, what the heck is this? But yeah, he. I mean, what can you do? You have to stay positive. If you let things get you down, it's. I mean, it does to everybody at some point. But to ultimately succeed, you got to be positive, and it's amazing when you're positive how you can influence people around you and how much quicker you can get things done.
Yeah, I would imagine that it was, as you said, it was going to be a long road to turn the whole Suzuki program around, and Greg has to go to Supercross, and Rogers knew, there had to be some really tough times throughout this process.
Yeah, exactly. I remember Roger giving me directions to Orlando, you know, so I said, well, how do I get there? He's like, well, you get on this 10 freeway, drive for 3 days, and then turn right on this. He said, and then turn right on the 75, drive for half a day, and you'll be there.
Wow. And had you ever been to the United States at this point?
I had been to for the GPs.
Oh, okay.
The prior 2 years at Budds Creek.
Yep.
Yes. So but I'd never been to the West Coast. I'd only been to the East Coast. Yeah.
Wow. So this is still the waning days of box fans. This is a box fan story.
Yep.
Whoa.
Yeah. I was pretty shocked when I found out how much you have to drive. Man, that was
Yeah.
That was incredible. I'll actually never forget that first road trip going from California to Orlando. From Orlando, the next one was Minneapolis. The next one was Anaheim, and then after Anaheim, it was Washington, Seattle. And then after Seattle was San Diego, and then after San Diego, we went to Atlanta, and then after that was the first national at Gatorback. I mean, I was like, these guys are crazy, man. How do they work like this? You know, it was unbelievable how much driving you did. It was, I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, and by the way, so you're racing in Minneapolis in second weekend of January, by the way.
Yeah,
That must have been great.
and I tell you something, if you look back, it was so cold. I've never been that cold in my life, you know. It was that year, 95 and 96, both years, it was like ice cold.
If any of the current semi-drivers or mechanics try to complain to you, have they ever even dared? Have they ever dared to even complain about anything? Because, man, you just topped any story any modern person's going to have. In 5 weeks, you topped it.
You know what? Yeah, I don't know. I think as time goes on, you forget, you know. So you just move on to what's new. And the thing is also, when you drove all that distance, when you got there, you threw your bike out and then you started working on it, you know, and you've got to get it ready for the race, and then you've got to wash your van, then you've got to go do the grocery shopping. I mean, those guys were tough. The nice part was the breakdown, you know, it's just fold up your Easy Up in 5 minutes and you're out of there. But yeah, I suppose it's all relevant.
That Gatorback race, I'm glad you brought that one up. So, yeah, the first couple Supercrosses for Greg, did he even come back with the shoulder injury, or did he just skip the rest until Gatorback, or did he come back at some point? No,
he came back pretty quick.
Oh.
So if I remember correctly, I still went to. I think he already raced in Seattle.
Wow. Okay.
So please don't quote me exactly, but it was just a short time, and he was back because he dislocated his shoulder, but he's a really, really strong guy, and has good muscles and stuff. So he would heal pretty quick actually, and he could deal with a lot of pain also. He's a tough sucker, man.
Oh, great. So you have very little off-season testing, zero Supercross experience, new bike, new team, new everything, and then he's coming in like the fourth round of the series off an injury with probably having zero practice.
Yeah, I remember. And the hardest thing is when you've been in the front winning races like we had the years before, and then you go to these Supercross races, and I remember Jeremy lapping him one time, and I was like, man, this poor guy, I don't know how he's going to deal with this, And that wasn't the first time he got lapped. He got lapped many times by McGrath, you know.
But this is why I wanted to bring up Gatorback. I remember this one distinctly. Yeah. The first, I don't know, this is one of my favorite moments of motocross. It seems so minor, but I remember like the first lap of that first 250 moto at Gatorback, and it just looked like this dude's like, now I'm back into my element, and I'm going to kick everyone's ass right now, and I'm going to show you what I can do. Like, he started like fifth, and I remember him just blowing by dudes in the first couple laps. Like, I'm outdoors, and now I'm going to show you what I'm all about. It was cool.
Right. I remember that too, and yeah, that was good. And then later in that year, through the nationals, I just remember the heat. It takes when you race in Europe for so many years, it's such a cooler environment. And then when you go to hot races, everyone struggles. Uh-huh. But when we came to the States, like most riders thrive in the heat. You know, it doesn't really bother them that much. So that was also, even though we came from South Africa where it's hot, it's amazing how quick you get acclimatized to something else, and it takes you a while to build up that resistance again to deal with with those conditions.
Yeah, that explains a lot because, Gatorback, I think he ended up breaking a wheel, right? So he didn't win that one. There would be like some races where I'm like, dude, this guy is so fast, and then there'd be a few races that weren't good. It was always up and down. So I guess part of that, you're adjusting to all these different things, the environment, the weather, and everything.
Yep. Exactly.
And how good really was the bike and team, especially that first year? Because, like you said, it's uphill battle all the time.
The team, I remember going to Suzuki, and you know, I don't want to be harsh on them because they were awesome to give him the opportunity, to give me the opportunity at the time, but they were so disorganized. There was no parts room. Everything was in boxes. To find anything, you had to practically be a magician. There was no testing crew. It was like their racing was an afterthought. They just wanted you to go, and they just wanted to participate. Mm-hmm. And Roger, myself, and Greg, and a few others there, the ultimate goal was to race to win, you know. So and it took a long time to get them back into it, and once they were fully committed, and that was the difference with when we made the move to KTM. You know, I'm jumping forward here, but KTM committed immediately and financially, and that's why their success came much quicker.
I give Roger credit for this. I know that you do a lot of the work as well. Roger is known as a team manager, and he's the man. So a lot of people point in his direction. And I'll say, yeah, it's definitely not all Roger over at KTM, and it wasn't all Roger at Suzuki. But to take a corporate culture, Suzuki's saying, we're just participating. Winning is way beyond our goals.
Right.
And in, say, 3 or 4 years, to have changed an entire corporate culture, that's something most people can't do. So I would assume that that's part of the power of Roger there. He changed Suzuki's entire outlook on how to go racing and what they should expect to do. That's amazing.
Exactly, and he lived that through his era at Suzuki. He saw what lengths they went to win. I mean, he tells me this story about when he was bending his forks in the 70s, and he went to Japan, and overnight they made a new fork that was 2 millimeters bigger in diameter. Wow. I mean, that is just. I can't even believe that they can do that, you know, and they fixed the problem. But that's how committed they were at that time. And he knew that was in there somewhere, and man, come hell or high water, he was going to get it back out of them, you know. And he's the only one that when he's not easy to deal with because he pushes hard, and motocross is the only thing that he's concerned with in life. You know, that is his goal, is to, but he'll push. But once he can get someone on his side and he gets them to move, and they see that he's actually not wasting their time, he has some valid points and things that are going to help, they jump on, and then you can really get the ball rolling. But at Suzuki, it did take a little while before we got that going. He got McGrath actually the very next year, so we joined in 95, 96, the team, they came out with a new bike. It structured a little bit, and then 97, he already landed Jeremy. And but Jeremy not winning that year, losing by a few points to Emig, and having those clutch problems and a rear wheel failure also at Charlotte.
Yep.
That set us back, I want to say, 5 years. When you don't, if you take a winner and you don't win with that winner, man, then it's really, really tough.
Oh, do you mean just yourselves, like mentally, or even the brand itself, or getting riders?
Everyone.
Everything.
I think everyone. I think getting riders. I think the brand, and I think even the team mentally. It's such a blow. It's hard to fight back from that. You know, really, really tough.
But the irony always is that you guys got McGrath, and I know it was late, and the team still, even in the beginning of the third year of you guys being there, maybe still wasn't 100% ready yet. But ironically, Greg goes out and wins the opener the same day that McGrath is making his debut on the bike.
That's right. That was what a day for us. I mean, I still remember that day. And it was chaos with Lamson and Jeremy.
Yep.
You know, bumping into each other. Two people, you know, that had come from opposite teams of all people to end up on the mat. And Greg, I think Greg was in about third, and if I remember correctly, I think Henry was up there, and Emig or Tortilli, I can't remember exactly. And he finally got to the front and won the race. I mean, that was just, and that was his best year ever. Actually, he got 5 podiums. And he finished fifth in the Supercross series. That was his best Supercross season by far. It was an amazing night for us, but a little bit chaotic, of course, because the new superstar ended up finishing. I think Jeremy finished 15th or something. Huh?
It was like his first race ever, and there's so much attention with this. I would imagine that people now might not realize, unless you were there like you were. I would imagine with McGrath at that time, it was quite a circus surrounding him. I mean, he's as popular as any rider has ever been. I would imagine the attention and spotlight and people surrounding him had to be pretty crazy.
It was, and but then again, you know, the infrastructure wasn't set up very well. He ran his own team. He worked out of Pro Circuit.
Yeah.
There were so many different things that didn't allow Roger to have full control. And in hindsight, I don't know if it's better or worse, but it definitely, from my point of view, it definitely hurt us. You know, there were too many people involved trying to point him in different directions, and it was just a big mix-up. And I'll give you the honest truth. To Jeremy, Roger called me on December 31st, 1996, and he said, I need you to meet me in Marietta with Greg's practice bike on the 2nd, and he gave me the address. And Greg was actually in South Africa having Christmas with his family, and I was here with my wife, and I was like, what the heck what is this? You know, so I got the bike ready. And lo and behold, I meet Roger at the Denny's, and we drive over and we go to McGrath's place. That was the first time he rode the bike, was the 2nd of January, 1997.
And by the way, you didn't even know who you were bringing the bike for that day.
No, he didn't say. And then I remember him riding it, and we were out there. There's a hospital built now where that track was, just up the road here, and you know, and then the deal came together from January 2nd to the first race. At all within the 10 days, everything all got locked up, and there he was at the race with the bike. I mean, I remember them bringing the graphics and the stuff on the Friday of practice or something. It was completely out of control, and so last minute it was crazy.
Yeah, so it wasn't the ideal circumstances. I mean, yes, you took a winner who had almost won every race last year, and he didn't win the title, but you guys didn't have your best shot at it, that's for sure.
Yep. That's fair to say. Yeah.
Now, what happened with you and Greg? By the time Greg comes around and actually ends up winning the 250 national title in '99, but were you not his mechanic at that point? Were you moving up in the chain?
That was, yeah, you're exactly right. That was Joey Maurer.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So Joey Maurer. So at the end of so basically '97 and '98, I worked for Greg. I did all the testing and all the practicing. A lot of the mechanics lived out of state. They didn't live in California. Uh-huh. I practically lived at Pro Circuit. I thought Mitch was my second boss, and we dynoed every week. We worked on the bikes nonstop. And then Roger told me, listen, you should move into R&D. That's the only way we're gonna be able to give Greg his best shot at winning the title. Is we have to have a better bike than our competition. We cannot be behind them in any way. The riders are too good. The other teams are good. We have to be on par or better. And actually, Greg got married to Amy, mm-hmm. and I was attached to Greg's visa as a P1, which is a sportsman visa. So at that time, I petitioned for my green card and an H1B1 visa, and I could do this due to working in R&D. I was able to, I was a pretty good welder. I could do a lot of things, and so Suzuki petitioned for this visa. I got this visa, and that's what ultimately got me to move. And at first, it was tough decisions for me. I was still young. I knew that for sure Greg was going to be successful because I knew his mindset and how determined he was to win this title, and I knew he wasn't going to give up till he got it done. But I also knew that for my own career that I needed to make the change, and I could see that we were lacking, and I couldn't do both. I was those 2 years in '97 and '98. I think I worked the most hours I've ever worked in my life. I gave everything I had, and it was hard on me, and still we were coming up short. So that next year, I went into that position, and Greg ended up being national champion, and we were really successful. I remember we had Larry Ward and Pichon, mm-hmm. and at the first race in Glen Helen, we went 1, 2, 3. Yeah. So that in itself was a very motivating thing for me. Even though I wasn't alongside Greg, I really felt like I had done my part to help them get better.
It's unfortunate because on the outside we know that Albee's a world champ, and obviously we know how good McGrath is, and a lot of the other guys on the team. You had LaRocco, who is a good rider, a lot of good riders, yeah. And they'd have some good races here and there, and you can't tell on the outside are these guys just not as good as the other guys? But it sounds like there was a lot of bike stuff that they were trying to overcome behind the scenes throughout those 4 years. Absolutely.
I mean, I remember that in '96 we got a brand new RM250.
Yeah.
And the first time we put it on the dyno at Mitch's place, it made 38 horsepower, and of course it had better torque. But Mitch had 125s making 38 horsepower. And the Yamaha and those things at that time, they were making like 45, 46 stock. We were so far behind, it was crazy.
Wow. That 96 bike,
yeah.
I think the hype was a problem because it came out a year after Roger goes back to Suzuki, and all the magazines are like, this is Roger's bike. Roger engineered this. This is going to dominate. And then all of a sudden, the season starts, and everybody's like, oh, the bike is slow. And I'm like, I thought this was revolutionary. So clearly, it wasn't quite Roger's bike, like the magazines had said.
No. I think what we did, both of us, is they had come up with this new engine concept, a couple other things. And, of course, typical way they want, this was like 3 years ahead. We pushed them to come out with it immediately,
Okay.
And that's where it backfired, because there wasn't enough development done to do it. Suzuki was already weak I shouldn't say weak. They already didn't invest as much time as what the other brands, I think, were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then when this bike came out and it was slow and heavy, and was tough. It was a reliable bike, and I still see some of them on the back of pickups today.
Yeah.
But man, you need to compete with the other guys. You gotta be within a few horsepower. Otherwise, you're not going to do it. There's no way.
By the way, let's not forget conventional forks, which I heard were actually good. Like, it's unfortunate now people look back and are like, what a joke. They went back to conventional right side up forks when everybody else had upside downs. But at the time, the concept, supposedly those forks were good at one point, or were they not? I don't know. That's what it seemed like.
No, you know what the trend, because I remember talking to him a little bit about that, and I was still a lot younger at the time, but in Europe, like Marizocchi forks, a lot of cars were actually going back to those forks.
Yes.
In Europe, and were very successful with them, Mm-hmm. And so when they talked about this fork, and at that time upside downs still had a very, very stiff feeling in the bike. It seemed like a logical thing to do, but in Supercross, it's just not the right way. Yeah, with the overhang you have underneath the fork leg with the fork body and all that, it just didn't work. No.
You mentioned that you guys tried to get this bike that was a few years out into production early. Look, sounds very similar to what goes on at KTM right now. I don't know if that's related or a coincidence or what, but it sounds very similar to the factory edition concept.
No, you're exactly right. So we joined KTM, and of course they basically were thinking about doing away with the 450, and they had a very old bike, very heavy,
carbureted,
super fast engine, carbureted, and they had this new 350. And Stefan Everts was a total believer in this bike, and it was hard to argue because Tony Caroli was smoking them on the thing. So we said, okay, we give it a 1 year go, with Andrew Short, and we got going with it, and there were a lot of things that were really, really good about that bike, but it was the only thing that it was missing was torque, and you cannot substitute torque for displacement. And we went to talk to them early in the season of 2011. We said, listen, if you want to get a top caliber rider like Ryan Dungey or Villepot or whatever, you're going to have to pay a lot more or be an extremely good talker to get some guy to come over here for 100 cc's less.
Yeah.
And we said, yes, it's working, and you can give them the choice, and we think that it's a great bike for a lot of people out there, But to race at the top level, I think you're going to have a competitive 450 also. And they gave us, for about 3 weeks, they gave us every excuse under the sun, and Roger eventually laid down the hammer and said, listen, I want the 450. I don't want this old thing. I want something new. And they said, okay, we'll do it. And they started in June, and by September, at the end of the season, when we were talking to Dunge, we got our first bike, and they did an amazing job. And they told us how much this thing was going to cost them, and we were a little bit crazy, but if we land Ryan, it'll be worth it. So obviously we landed Ryan, and it was worth it. And then they had never ever won a 450 race in the U.S. in Supercross ever. Mm-hmm. They had never won an outdoor title ever. And the very next year, the second race in Phoenix, Ryan won his first Supercross race, which was a milestone for them, and won their first outdoor in 2012.
Yep.
I mean, and that just set the tone, and that was the onset of the factory edition, because you have to have 400 bikes available to race the bike. So this was a way of moving something up, which was completely legal because, but just weird because it didn't fall into the model year that is tradition by all the Japanese brands, which is pretty much June, July.
Yeah, because you still that year you could buy a 2012 a regular 450 SXF, a carbureted old school bike still was available, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
June to September, I mean, look, you know as well as anyone, that is just, I mean, that might as well be a week in the way these things normally work. That's maybe sounds like, 3 months to get a bike together. No. Like, that's years worth that was probably done between that June and September.
Yes, and the amount of testing and the trips back and forth to Europe and all that, and I can honestly say this without a shadow of doubt, I don't think there's another motorcycle brand that could have done it. I mean, I'm amazed at what they did, and when it came out, yes, it wasn't perfect. We still had our struggles with I mean, you have zero data on this thing about the weight bias, about how you're going to set up suspension, about what kind of horsepower you're going to get out of it. You know, there are all these factors on the table that you know nothing about, and now you have a champion throwing his leg over it, and he wants to win. He doesn't want to know about all your excuses about not having any data on the thing. He's just like, okay, we got a race. I want to win, and so it was tough. I mean, I'm sure there were moments with Ryan when he was like, did I make the right choice? There were moments with us when we were like, what the heck did we get into? But ultimately, within 1 year, we knew that we were competitive, that we could ultimately win a Supercross title, and that's then. After that year, I felt like, okay, now we're ready to fight for this thing, and we were. I think he finished second the following year to Villapoto. The next year, we went 1 and 2 with Kenny and Ryan, right behind Villapoto too, and finally in 2015 when we came up with the current model bike we have, Ryan was champion, and then we were well on our way. Yeah.
Yeah, that 2015 bike, was that essentially all the stuff you had worked on in 12, 13, 14?
Yes, and you know, they were amazing on getting the weight down and all these things that we talked about that I really thought that I talked about a lot to Suzuki when I was there that never really came about. They actually made it happen. I mean, we went from the heaviest 450 out there to the lightest one, and it was electric start.
Yeah. Okay, so we all know that was a huge deal when Roger goes from Suzuki to KTM, especially because, A, Roger has heritage at Suzuki, and second, because KTM had zero heritage as far as, top-level American motocross racing went. How did that go for you? You slid over there with him. How did he tell you? Did KTM approach you? How did that work on your end to switch?
This is a pretty cool story. So in 2010, we went through Supercross. Ryan was Supercross champion.
Yep.
We were in the outdoors. He was winning too. I think he won 10 races that year out of the 12. But Roger said to me, "Hey, Suzuki, I don't have a contract. My contract ends in September, and they're not willing to talk to me about it till then. And at very best, they're only willing to do a 1-year deal for me." And he said, "I'm really concerned." And I could see the pullback that they were having due to the recession. You could see it in our budget, in all kinds of things. And I was a little concerned myself also. And so I just thought, let me just put my feelers out there and talk to a couple of my friends, see if there's something around. So I talked to just mechanics that I knew, and I asked them, and there were a couple of guys that, of course, said, "Hey, I think if you were interested, we could talk to the team manager or the boss and see if there's something for you." So I told Rog in June. I said to him, "Hey, Rog, I'm just looking too, just in case something happens." And he told me, "No, don't do anything." So I was like, "Oh, okay." and I completely trusted him. He had always had my back. He I never doubted that he would leave me high and dry, ever. Mm-hmm. And then about 3 weeks later, about 2 weeks after the Colorado race, he called me into his office and he said, "I'd like to have you and Penny come over." There was a free weekend. He said, "Come over for dinner on Friday night." So we went over to his house and we were sitting there and I could see that, like, I was waiting for him to say something, it wasn't coming about. We were just doing our normal thing, talking about racing and everything. And then finally he said to me, "Hey, I reached out to, or I've been talking to KTM."
Oh.
And I said, "Adi, there are 3 other brands. That you really have to choose them? You know, like seriously." I said, "I don't know much about them, but I said, you know, they have had super fast bikes in the past and 125 and stuff. But I said, like, Rog, they're not going to do it. You know, it's too different." And he stopped me in my tracks. He said, "Listen, these guys are committed. They're going to fund us, and they want to win here. They want to attack when everyone else is pulling back. They want to come in and be a player in this game, you know."
Wow. Yeah, but you were right to think that at the time. I mean, we all obviously thought you guys were insane. I don't know. It's happened so quickly, and the success is so great. It might be hard for people to remember now. Dude, 2010 KTM, they barely even had a team. Like, it was not good at all.
Yeah. Yeah. And so then right there and then I said, "All right, if you do it, I do it. You know, no problem." And and Karina, Roger's wife, I think somehow she had started this whole ball rolling. She's never really admitted that to me, but I think she did. And then that next morning I left and I went to Havasu. We were gonna go up and hang out on the lake and stuff. And I was on the boat and Pitt called me, you know, and he said to me, "Ian, I talked to Roger today, and he said he's going to come if you come. So I need you to commit, you know." I said, "I'll come if he comes. You know, you get him and I'll be in there." And so this went back and forth a little bit, and then they sent me a proposal, and they were very, very fair on their proposal, and you know, I was happy with that. And then Rog said, "No, he's in." So I told Pitt, "Okay, I'm in." And then Rog went completely quiet, never talked about this thing anymore. And then the one day I mentioned it at work to him at Suzuki in his office, and he said, "Never talk about this at Suzuki.
Wow.
We never talk about it. When we hear, we are fully here for Suzuki. We do not talk about anything else."
Wow.
I said, "Oh, okay." And he can sometimes be quite brash, you know. You have to know how to take it. So I was like, "All right." And then I got a little worried. I'm like, maybe he's lined me up here, and I've already committed to these guys, and he's not in.
Yeah.
And but he was just completely fair. And then I remember at Southwick going to that race. We met in the hotel, and he said, "Okay, tomorrow, if Ryan wins the title, we tell him. You know, I've made my commitment." And so I remember Ryan won the championship that day, and he was over the moon. You know, he's the only guy to win the Supercross and Motocross title in the same year, all of 20 years old.
Yeah,
and,
as a rookie. Yeah, first one ever. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and we went into his motorhome that night, and we're talking, and his dad's in there, and everyone's so excited, and we told him, and man, it looked like someone ripped the rug out from underneath him. He was so pissed, and I felt so sad for him, you know, because he felt like he's this young kid. He's worked up. He's got everything going for him. You know, he's lined up to just keep the ball rolling, and things were going to change majorly. And he had Ryan to this day still has a very, very special relationship with Roger. They connected, and he you know, if Roger told him you had to do 10 star jumps before the race, you know, he wouldn't ask why, he would just do it.
Yeah.
That's how much blind faith he had in Roger. So that was a tough day for sure. But then I knew Roger had made his commitment, and deep down I was relieved.
Oh yeah, you knew you weren't going to get hung out to dry at least.
Yeah, I knew I wasn't going on my own, you know, and and then we went back, and I think there were only 2 races after that, and I gave my notice to Suzuki, and that was the beginning of the end for that chapter.
But you had no idea through all these conversations with Pitt or the contract they sent you or telling Ryan. Had you even looked at or touched a KTM motorcycle at that point?
Never. We never came to KTM. We never did anything till we completely finished so after the last race, I came in on the Monday, and I'd given them my notice, and that day they said to me, okay, by the end of today, you have to be out. And I completely understand. They don't want someone who's going somewhere else at their facility when, especially at the end of the season, that's normally when new parts come in and stuff like that. So I spent the whole day. I mean, I'd been Suzuki at this point 17 years. I spent the entire day cleaning my stuff out. You have stuff everywhere, and you don't even remember anymore.
Yeah.
And got all my stuff lined up, and I left, and then I was at home for 2 weeks, and then after that we came to KTM for the first time. We met everyone down in Marietta, and the next day I flew to Austria to meet the team and go through the whole thing and sign our deals, and that's how it started. So yeah.
Which win is more shocking, when Greg wins the 97 LA Supercross or when Ryan on the KTM wins round 2 in 2012? Because both of those are not ones that were just guaranteed, like, oh, this will happen. I mean, it took a lot to get those 2 wins. So which one were you standing there more like, I can't believe we just did this?
I think with Greg, because with Greg, it had been he was already in there 3 years, and I hope he never reads this the wrong way when he reads this article, but I thought there was a part of me that thought it might never happen, because I knew how tough it was to win a Supercross and how few people ever actually accomplish it.
Yeah.
So I thought, maybe it's never going to happen for him. So that day was like just huge, And with Ryan, he was already Supercross champion. Yes, the brand was far away, but I'd already watched him practice and watched him ride with other guys. So deep down in my heart, I knew there was the potential to win,
Yeah.
So I would say that one wasn't as surprising as the 97 win in the mud.
Well, it just really is a testament then to Greg's determination to do something that was not easy and was not necessarily guaranteed to happen. He just frickin' made it happen anyway.
Right.
So there you go.
Right.
There's your compliment. He did what he necessarily couldn't do.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so in your role, we come to today. So everyone knows that Roger's a team manager, but are you talking to Marvin every weekend, or when you had Dunge and when you had Kenny, Brock Tickle, everyone that's been on the team, even Trey Kennard? Are you interacting with these guys every weekend, just like the team manager would anyway? Also,
I would say so, and Roger's always valued my point of view, and yes. So I would say from that side, absolutely. Uh-huh. And one of the first contracts I did personally myself was the one with Trey.
Uh-huh.
So that's when I started doing more of those. And then when we came up with the renewal for Marvin, I did that one and a couple others. But before that, I'd never been involved in contract negotiation. Roger would always ask me about the rider and what I thought and all that, but I never. It was none of my business about what they were going to get paid or how their bonus structure worked or anything like that. That was, the team manager side. And then just as of with Trey, which is about 2 years ago or something, that was one of the first ones I started doing. And of course I knew a little bit about Ryan's contract and stuff at the time because Pitt involved me and Roger, because the first contract we did with Ryan, we did actually in Austria.
Wow.
Together as a group, So so it started to change from about 2012 on. But I was always involved with Kenny and with Marvin and the riders we have. I try to give them my feel on things and what I can see, but also I don't want to overload them. Sometimes everyone has a different opinion, and then sometimes you just got to hold back a little bit and not give them too much. There's only a certain amount of things they can really apply. They can't do everything, That's just impossible.
Well, you've seen how much the world has changed in that perspective. I mean, when it was you and Greg of the Box Fan, that pretty much was you and Greg of the Box Fan. Now we have, Alden Baker certainly involved. and the teams are much larger with suspension guys and all the other techs. You got Carlos over there doing his part. Roger's doing his part. Riders have trainers. There's just so many more people involved in it than it used to be. I would think that's a real problem. You could have 10 people talking to a rider in 10 minutes if you don't do it right.
Exactly, and the rider never wants to say no because they always want to listen, but you can just confuse them, and you always got to remember a lot of times they're just young kids,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's better to discuss amongst ourselves and just give them 1 or 2 points to work on and let them focus on that. But it has changed dramatically. There's so much data you can get from the bikes and from the suspension and from the different riders and from the filming guides and there's just it is grown so big from 20 years ago. It truly has.
Is there another side to you we don't see? Like, have you torn into guys? Have you yelled at guys? Do you have that in you? Because like I said, you seem like the happiest guy ever at the races, but is there a little boss man in you somewhere?
I think so. I'm not proud of it when it comes out, but the guy I can really, really vent to the most is actually Roger. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of people, they always feel intimidated by him, I would say, in a way.
Sure.
But I've never felt like that. I really feel like I can just let loose, and he's going to tell me, no, you're wrong, or yes, I agree. He's very black and white. I don't have to worry about him trying to be politically correct with me. If I'm wrong, he'll just tell me straight to my face,
But there is
and sometimes
strategy.
I go,
oh.
yeah, there is a strategy, and sometimes I go home with my tail between my legs and tell my wife, man, I feel like such an idiot, or, Roger's such a jerk, but that's I quickly get over it because 9 times out of 10 I realize I'm in the wrong.
I love those stories, though, because, and I also know for sure, I've heard through the grapevine, when Ryan was learning the new bike and learning the new team, that I'd hear these stories like, oh, man, I heard that Ryan and Roger were seen yelling at each other. This is a disaster. But in reality, that's how that's supposed to work, right? Like, if everyone is just being polite to each other, you're never going to really accomplish anything. Same thing with a husband and wife. Sometimes you've really got to have it out to make the right decision. So when I hear those stories, I'm actually like, that's the way it should be. Sometimes you guys need to tell each other straight and argue, and you'll come back and work the next day. It's not going to break up the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
I agree. I think you have to be straight and you have to argue and stuff. The only thing that I feel like I've got a little better with ages is that you always have to have respect in a way,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes when I was young, I could definitely have the childish side come out of me, and then that just makes things 10 times worse. It's hard to control that because it becomes tit for tat.
Yeah.
But so with age, I've definitely seemed like, I don't know how much better, but I feel like I am a little bit better in that area, and then that really helps you move forward. Even though you can have a heated argument, I think in the end it gets everything out in the open, and most times you figure you get some common ground, and then you can move on that.
Are you nervous or worried at all? I don't know how big a change this is for you. Are you worried like, wow, this is a bigger load, or things I didn't have to do now I'm responsible for? Is it changed that much for this next season?
I think a little bit of me is worried.
Uh-huh.
You don't want anything to go backwards. You want to keep it the same or do a little bit better. You want to show that you have some worth. I think that worries me.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I feel confident is that I can always reach out to Roger, and I know that he will back me. For sure, and he'll give me sound advice. And I mean, more than that, I can't ask for.
Yeah, there's no greater endorsement than that. And it all started with him. I mean, you both basically said, I'm only going to KTM with the other guy. I mean, that's about as big of an endorsement as you're going to get. I'm not doing this without Ian. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
And is it, with the travel and the pressure, and now the expectations are mightily high because KTM wins a lot, can you still feel that way? Like, I'm still living out the dream? Or do sometimes you find yourself getting caught being so competitive that it's hard to see your way out and be like, hey, I'm still at the races. This is cool. Or do you lose sight of that sometimes because you guys are so competitive now?
I do lose sight of it sometimes, for sure. But I mean, when a rider goes to the podium or they stand on top of the podium, I just think to myself sometimes, one thing that stuck out in my mind when I was a little guy, I always used to wonder, like I'd see Johnny and them wheeling their bikes back and forth from the line, getting ready for the gate to drop, and their spokes used to always be so shiny. And I used to think, how do they keep their bikes so clean, And I'll walk up and I'll just see these bikes, and you see all the special little bolts and nuts on them, and those things still to this day are like, man, that is cool, It just makes a factory bike. It's really something special, and it's a small thing, but it just stands out to me. Now I know how they keep their wheels so clean. They're always replacing them. Back in my day, I rode 2 years on the same wheels. Things were hammered and ugly after that.
They don't clean them; they just replace them. That's how it works. Huh?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Hey, last thing. So Marvin's obviously your guy now. Now that Ryan is retired, man, you look at the math, so close to 2 titles this year.
Yes.
And it didn't even dawn on me so much until that banquet we had Saturday night when, he had a great season. He won races. He won the Monster Cup. He was in title contention. You're like, he had a great year. But then I'm like, oh, man, no one at his level gets 2 seconds and says that was great. So it had to be a little bit mixed this year to come up only really a few points short in both the way it all turned out.
Yeah, and exactly. It's he came up. He got really, really close, and he fixed a lot of problems he had before. The years before, he would have like a huge dip where he would have a 15th or a 16th when he would hurt himself. This year, his worst result was 5th.
Yeah.
And I really feel like he dug deep and he did a great job. The only thing is we didn't win enough races. He won 5 motos, Eli won 15, Ken Roxon won 2, and Barsha won 2. And the other guy, you can't let them win that much, But I have to tip my hat to Eli. He was better, and he deserves it. But we're going to do everything we can to try and get a little better again and win a few more races and hopefully at the end come out victorious. Yeah,
it's just tough at your level. Second sucks in its own way, even though to get second you have to do really, really well also. But it's better than third and it's better than 10th, but you want to win.
Yeah. And the sad thing is like when we do that, when we had the prize giving at the last race there, the top 10 guys, that's the top 10 in the United States motocross races and some in the world, because we have riders, international riders racing too.
Yeah.
That's an incredible feat,
Yes.
And you forget about it a little bit. It gets it. We put a lot of emphasis onto first place and onto the winner and maybe second. But some of the other guys, it gets a little too diluted, I feel. But they all deserve a nod. They've all gone out there hurting at one point, where they've twisted their knee or they've done something, or their bike, something's not 100%, whether it's a brake that gets jammed up with mud or a shift level or something, and they all figure out a way to get to the finish line, and that is a massive accomplishment,
Yeah. It's all these things. You still seeing those wheels and your riders in the top 10. It's all that perspective that it's hard to keep that sometimes when the number one goal is to be number one. But that's your job now. We'll see how well you handle it. All right. Well, this has been spectacular, even better than I thought. I knew you had some stories, but these were great, so I appreciate that. Yeah. And I guess we'll see you at Monster Cup. Is that like kind of your debut? We're I don't know. Is your name tag switch?
Yes.
Or it's just going to look like the same old thing?
Yeah. Oh no, I'll be at Monster Cup, and I'm sure Roger will be right there with me, but he'll be able to go. Actually, he's lucky. He'll be able to go to the podium more now. If Jason wins, he can go. If Marvin wins, he can go, because he'll have the group logo shirt on. So
okay.
So he'll be able to go to the podium all the time, which he likes. He hates it when he forgets where the podium is.
You guys don't get out of practice too much. You got a pretty good record there.
Yeah. Are you going to the Nations?
Oh, yes, I will. Actually, that's correct. I will be at the Nations. I'm sure you are too, right?
Yep. I'll be there, so that should be good.
Your guys' hands are going to be full because you have to handle like Caroli, Hurlings, all those guys. Prado, are they all somewhat involved with your program there?
Yes, so they'll all be under our trailer for that weekend, and then we have, I think, Team Austria. We're sending up something for them too, and Australia. Most of these teams are the majority of them are Husky and KTM. So yeah, we'll definitely have our hands full.
Oh, boy.
We'll see how it goes. Yep.
You might want to just say, Roger, you're the team manager one more time, just for this weekend. We have 18 guys. You can handle that.
He's going to have his hands full. He's got to bring the cup back to the States.
That's right. He's got a different job that weekend. That's true.
Yeah, he's got to make it happen. I told him, come on, we got to get this thing back here.
Hey,
but I think they have a great shot. So hopefully they'll do it.
Well, yeah, that reminds me, and I'm going to let you go here, but I forgot. I had that great conversation with you and Eldon at Redbud, where you guys are all about Team USA, and I'm like, well, wait, you guys aren't even from the United States, but you guys were both very adamant. Yes, you are. You are Americans. You are pulling for Team USA.
Yes, it took me 15 years on a visa, and then finally I got my green card. And I had my green card for 5 years, and right after that, I applied for my American citizenship, and I'm an American citizen. Yeah, so yeah, I feel strongly for the States. I have an accent, a weird accent, and I was born in another place, but I'm American.
That's good. Hey, but Vlander in there, that's messing up the whole works. South Africa's best riders on the Dutch team. They're, as far as I'm concerned, right up there to potentially win this thing. That's crazy how that worked out.
Yeah, the Dutch team are going to be super strong. So in South Africa, there are many people that have a mom or a dad that is from another country. Mm-hmm. It's because South Africa is not that old, about 120 years. Johannesburg, the area I'm from, or a little bit more than that now. But so his father is Dutch. So I think he has a dual citizenship. He's Dutch and South African. So that's why he's riding for Holland. So, man, they're going to be strong, with Jeffrey and him and Koldenhoff. They are definitely going to be on the radar for sure.
And that concludes our interview with Ian Harrison. Does that not get you even more pumped up? I cannot believe Motocross of Nations is coming this soon. It is next weekend. You have one more weekend without a race, and then that's it. We have officially landed at Redbud for Motocross of Nations. Ian will be there managing 172 riders from a variety of countries, it sounds like. Roger DeCoster will be there managing the American team. But what a fascinating international story of complete humble roots, making his way to Europe, making his way to the United States with bullheaded determination and just a will to make it happen. And there are so many stories like that in this sport, and it's always refreshing to know that, honestly, when it comes to motocross at least, I don't know any other fields. I've never really worked in any other industries, so I don't know anything about any of that. But I do know in motocross, it sure seems like if you want things badly enough, there's enough work out there. You're going to be putting in some sacrifices, but you can make your dreams come true. And Ian is an awesome guy. He's not going to be signing as many autographs as Roger has, but if you do see him at the races, shake the guy's hand, say hi. He's as friendly and awesome to talk to as anyone you're ever going to meet, and he is a dirt bike guy through and through. Hope you enjoyed the interview. And I enjoy the support that we get from Yoshimura. One more shout out to our sponsor of this podcast. Check them out at yoshimura-rd.com and follow them on Instagram at yoshimura_rd. Just looking at a post right now. Tony Elias and the legendary Suzuki and Yoshimura road racing team here in the U.S. just keeps on winning races. Something special about those GSXRs with the Yoshimura exhaust, and they do all the work at the Yoshimura shop, and they build some very, very fast road racing machines. Racer X brand, that's where you get your Racer X clothing. We have the Patriotic collection that we will inspect and expect you to have at Donations. We'll be doing roll call to make sure that everyone is wearing their Patriotic Racer X brand attire at Redbud. If you don't have it, there's still time. We'll ship some to you before the race. Go to racerxbrand.com and also follow at racerxbrand on Instagram some hilarious photos of a bald eagle donning Racer X attire in some very patriotic settings. So check that out. Racer X brand and at Racer X brand. Type in exhaust in all caps, get 20% off, and let me dominate Mathis in the sales pitch department. That's our show for this week. Donations is coming up. We'll have some more interviews between now and then we'll see everybody at Redbud. Cannot wait. Or if you're on the West Coast, I'll see you in Vegas for Monster Cup, or I'll see you at Straight Rhythm. Travel season is about to begin again. Can't wait, and I get to hang out with people like Ian Harrison every weekend, which makes it really fun as well. See you soon.